All right. Well, and again, just a reminder for everyone. Thank you for, always listening and sharing out and keep doing the thing, keep sharing out, keep spreading love. The goal here, the Health Made Simple, podcast is really to really make health simple for us. I know that sounds redundant in the name of it, yet so often there's so much information out there and so much science. And I happen to love it. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it because it's never ending. It just doesn't end. And my goal is always to help be that deciphering tool to some degree, where I can learn all the research. I try to figure out the pros and the cons of things, the goods and the bad, the ugly, make, maybe even change some things that I've said in the past, and then bring that to the table in a show like this and really simplify it, dumb it down for us. And so you don't have to do or spend a lifetime. A lot, very much like myself and other practitioners, we spend a fair amount of our what seems to be like free time, researching and diving deeper and deeper into topics. So welcome everyone. Keep doing the thing, keep sharing out, keep spreading the love. All right, so let's dive into some of these clinical insights. First one I want to talk about is really a tale of two tapes. Two females, one about 30, one about 40, I think 30 and 41 years old. And this is a conversation about being of the phrase I've used in the past. And again, this is absolutely not out of judgment. It's observation clinically and what's healthy metabolically for us. And this is really about, I want to kind of share with you what skinny fat looks like without actually showing you two different bodies. And so in our office, is what we have something called an in-body evaluation. It's a body composition test. You stand on it, bare feet, bare hands, you stand still for a moment. It's an impedance is the way that it works. Electrical current goes through the body, and it gives us all these amazing measurements for us. It gives you body fat mass, body fat percentage, left arm versus right arm, water weight, skeletal muscle mass, overall body fat percentage, some really good data so we know the composition of the individual. And I really love this test specifically for my ladies. And I'm going to explain to you why on this, because so often the emphasis has just been on the scale, that I want to weigh a certain amount of weight. And if I stay at that weight, my high school weight or my 20s weight, I'm good to go. Yet how we are made up is really going to determine our health and longevity. So I'll walk you through this and then we'll backtrack. And then if you have any questions, you just fire them at me. So there's two females, one about 30, one about 41. And the reason I picked these two out, it just happened to be, it was a little random. Visually, both young, pretty, attractive young human beings. And when I say attractive, like both of them are probably, well, I have the numbers right here. One's 105 pounds and one's 107 pounds. So I literally have their charts in front of me, which is pretty cool. And so visually you would say, oh, okay, they're both about the same, right? 105, 107 pounds. This is about the same, but the way they're made up is entirely different. So, and I'll explain to you also how I got to wanting to see both of these tests side by side. So when I further evaluate the tests, the one has the body fat percentage was 17, and that's fantastic, especially for females, anywhere between like 18 and 25, fantastic. And if you visually view this person, you would just say, oh, she's a thin young female. The other person probably said the exact same thing, yet the body fat percentage, and this is the difference, was over 30. So again, that's 17% for one and over 30 for another, the exact same weight, roughly the same height. So this one, we have to step back and go, oh goodness, same height, same weight, but body makeup is entirely different. And trust me, the one that was, at 17%, there's not a lot of muscles. The last thing you'd ever call this individual was muscular, because they still look thin, but very, very healthy. So the one that had the higher body fat percentage, I had a little more of a conversation with her, and there was no comparison at the time. It just was one of those things I wanted to look at the two because I knew they were very similar. And I asked her about her diet. And I walked through her chart with her, and I kind of walked her through this one part. We can tell the body composition. So even if I didn't know someone, I didn't see them, I could look at the body composition. I look at the skeletal muscle mass, the weight, and the body fat mass, and I could tell you what their body essentially is like. And then I asked her a little bit about her diet. And lo and behold, and this is, I just bringing this up for observation, but this is a very common observation for us that are practicing. The one that was at 30, almost 31% body fat at the exact same weight has been a vegetarian or vegan for 21 years, no animal proteins, which will fall right into some of the other conversations we're going to have tonight. If we don't have proteins, adequate amounts of proteins, very difficult to make muscles in the human body. I'm not saying you can't do it with plants. Very difficult. And you'll see in just a moment here, because there's another question about what's the best type of like powdered proteins. And I'll answer that, but very, very significant. Again, and this is why I encourage all, especially if you got, if you know, men and ladies, same thing. If you're local, and this really applies for guys as well. We can't just use the scale, but body composition is so important. I call it the truth slayer. I have a love-hate relationship with the truth slayer. Half the time I don't want to get on it because I know what it's going to say. It's going to tell me the truth that I probably put on a little extra weight, and probably lost a little bit of muscle mass or whatever. And and it's okay to ebb and flow, but this discrepancy between 17% and 30%, big difference on two people side by side that look roughly the same.
Absolutely. And just this sense of almost antiquated of like thinking of health as just a number on the scale. I think I have a relationship with the in-body as well. And it's seen me in my brightest times and beyond. And it's such a cool way to capture like all the things that are going on within, because we are so much more than a number on a scale.
We really are. And that's where it becomes fun, when we start to have different data points. And that's really what I consider the in-body to give us. It just gives us data points like, what is our muscle this month? What was it this time last year? And it really gives you a nice little graph. So that was really my first clinical insight. Do I think that the fact that she's been a vegetarian, this really should be the big question. Do I think that plays a role in the fact that she is maintaining the same weight, which the body is very, very good at doing, maintaining the same weight but losing muscle mass? I do clinically think that's a very important part of what's taking place. The other individual, the one that's at 17%, when I first started working with her, my emphasis was on eating more meat and doing more push-ups. And as a result of doing those two things, the numbers changed, the data points changed. The weight, I don't know that changed at all, but the data points, the makeup of the body, and just a reminder, the stronger we are, the longer we survive. It's hard to kill strong people. So, and I love that saying, so I'm going to say it as often as I possibly can. So it's hard to kill strong people. So mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually strong, we're good to go. All right. So that's clinical insight number one. This next one I want to share, and it's just completely different, but it really, I got to be honest, they kind of warmed my heart, and I want to share this. When I shared it with the crew today, they kind of same response. So, the mother I have seen, she came with her daughter, and this time she actually, just prior to seeing them, she sent in her husband. That was first time. So family ordeal to some degree. Mom's leading the way on the health charge. Very common in that when it comes to health, that the moms do that. And the mom's always very inquisitive, very integrated in her health, looking for options, and has been through a lot of different things. Anyways, I see her daughter, and her daughter has frequent headaches. Her daughter, probably 13 years old, is just my guess. And so she goes through these bouts of headaches where they like wipe her out for a week, and it's awful. Anyone's had a headache before. Having one for an evening is awful, never mind for a week straight. So I totally get it. So anyways, when she comes in and gets adjusted, I adjust her, and then I do this technique. It's a cranial occipital technique where I essentially just stretch out. She's lying flat on her back on the chiropractic table, and I just put my fingers underneath really the base of her skull, and I slightly and lightly traction out. And you could almost see the wave of ease go through the girl's body. And instantly the headache goes away, and it goes away for months at a time, which is wonderful. There's a lot of explanations for that. Yes, I just adjusted her. And then right after adjusting her, it's almost like I'm resetting essentially the vagus nerve. And that could be a conversation for another time, but that is the one that can keep us stuck in sympathetic dominance. So I'm telling you all of this, and this is that, none of that's the cool part. The cool part is the mom sees me doing this and says to me, "What are you doing over there?" Inquisitive. And I said, "Well, I traction out." And she's like, what do you traction? She wanted the details. And I said, well, I'm tractioning out the space between her occiput and her atlas, which is the first vertebra in the cervical spine. And I said, and by doing this, I open up the gates for the natural cerebral spinal fluid to flow. That's literally the flow of the body. That's the chi. And once that starts circulating around the brain again, it's not as congested. The headache gets to go away. And I'm giving her all these details. She walks over and she goes, can you show me how to do it?
That's so incredible.
Incredible. And on so many ways. So you bet your butt. And I know I had a waiting room full of people and everything. I said, I'm teaching her. And it was a very, very prideful moment for anyone that, anyone that has an opportunity to mentor in anything. You love to give away your tools. You love to give away your lessons. You love to give away your prized possessions that you've been able to serve other people with. So no doubt the next 15 minutes, the three of us worked on. So I would do it, and I would have the mom do it. And I would have the daughter just kind of like coach the mom and tell her, have her feel like this. And then I'd put my hands underneath the mom's hand and we'd traction out together until she got it. That quite frankly lit me up. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder how many other moms or dads are looking for an opportunity to do that. And there's so many things. We don't have to be a doctor at home to help each other. So this is like, and if I don't have to see the daughter again for a year, so be it. Beautiful, because mom's helping out with her headaches. So it was just a little clinical insight that mom just sitting there in observation, literally asked me, how do I do that? And then asked me if I could show her. And of course I did.
What a beautiful connection point between the two of them as well. So like she's receiving this love from you as like a practitioner with like 25 years under your belt. There's something also really special about receiving that gift from her mom herself.
100%. And the daughter was so into it. She's like, no, mom, no, you're going too hard. Like you got to go softer, use less pressure. It was the whole moment was just so awesome. It's one of those, I definitely was one receiving in that moment. It was fantastic.
That's beautiful reflection, Bart. I love it.
Yeah.
We got some good people around us.
Yeah. So, and I think about that, and I then it makes me think about how many times I always invite so I see a lot of pregnant women for many reasons. One, they're just, it's the body goes through a lot. And there's this one move, this one kind of therapy that I do for them that anybody can do. And I always invite them. I said, bring your husband with you. I will show him how to every single night make your low back pain go away. And some of the husbands end up showing in the office. It takes like 2-3 minutes, but there's this really easy move to do with the traction and out the legs and just kind of slightly shaking the legs and getting some blood flow from the ankles back into the low back and traction out the low back. So, and it's such an easy thing. So if the mom is out there listening to this, if you're pregnant, send them to your chiropractor and have your chiropractor teach them how to help loosen up the low back for the pregnant mommy, because your backs do get tight.
That's so beautiful. And for our listeners who are local with us or are visiting Santa Rosa Beach, I'm just going to put in our contact information in the chat in the case you would like to have a little time with Dr. Bart yourselves. Would you say also, like with that pregnancy adjustment, Bart, is that the body flow and the chi coming back in as well? Like same as the occiput?
100%. It's very similar. We're working at the other end. So there's a cranial sacral technique. So think of the base of the skull as your cranium, and the sacrum is the other part. And those are the two things that must move properly. And they have this real unique, what they call counter nuance. There's a unique type of flow. It's not like pumping back and forth, but it kind of counter nutates. So it's like a swiveling pumping action. And therefore, if your sacrum or your pelvis gets locked up, that's where literally your sacrum can be causing headaches. So getting your sacrum, and when you have a baby wedged in between your pelvis, you're locking up the sacrum. The pelvis is expanding, it's opening up, and it jams up the sacrum. So it changes flow, and hormones can change, sleep patterns get disrupted. But if you get the sacrum freed up in a very gentle way, the results for the mama bear is just, it's literally great. To them, it's miraculous for that day because they get that peace in their body.
That is a beautiful thing. I love it.
All right. Moving on. I got a couple more here. So another clinical insight. I have this young lady, I say young, she's a little younger than me, so which is makes her young. She comes in and she has this vicious cycle going on. And I think a lot of people can relate to this one, where she wants to lose some weight. She wants to get healthier again, get back into fitness. And every time she does it, she runs into issues. And in her situation, she ends up with back pain or hip pain or mid-thoracic pain when she starts to run again or get after it a little bit. So this vicious cycle, she gets, out of shape, overweight for her. And then she gets motivated, gets out exercising, backfires, gets hurt, comes back in my office, things starts again. The whole cycle starts again. And it compounds. This happens several times a year. Well, anyways, this time around, and I think I've actually said this probably many times over the years, because this cycle has been repeated. So this time I said, hey, listen, all right, this is what we're going to do. I don't want you to do any more cardio. I don't want you to run. I don't want you to push your body. Technically, if we're going to lose weight, we're going to lose it in the kitchen. I want to challenge you. And everything I could, every mind play I possibly could, everything, super Yoda type, tricks, whatever I could do. All right, give me 30 days. Prove me wrong on this one. Go gluten-free for 30 days and come back and tell me that you haven't lost weight and don't feel better. I didn't really have anything anchoring that, but other than I promise you, you will lose weight and you won't be in as much pain. That was all I said. She's like, blah, blah, blah. I said, let's just do it. Prove me wrong. Instead of taking any more medications and multiple steroid shots and all these different things. Sure enough, 14 days ago is when I did it. She came in today and she said, I can't believe this. And immediately I knew what she was going to say because her face is less puffy. And immediately she says, 14 days, no gluten. I didn't take away alcohol. That's next. I didn't take away alcohol. It's just 14 days, no gluten. Didn't even say watch out for gluten-free products. Just 14 days, no gluten, which we know is pro-inflammatory. 14 days, she lost 7 pounds.
She made it halfway and she is already doing it. That's such a great place to start. Wow.
It's beautiful. And that's where action and results. So action becomes the medicine. And we can never discount how powerful taking action in anything, especially the things that we have the greatest, challenges with or the greatest fears with, that action is the greatest source of medicine, because one way or another, you will learn either what to do or what not to do and move on. And in this scenario, simple enough, this is the part I love. Then she says, and my husband is gluten-free. And I know her husband. I said, your husband agreed to be gluten-free? He said, no, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm cooking, he's eating. Because he's in pain all the time. Same thing. He's a little bit over 50 years old. He works hard with his body, constantly in pain, constantly using Advil. And she's like, he's gluten-free. We're all gluten-free. We're not going back.
That is such a strong change. And I think all of us have probably run into someone we haven't seen in a while. And if they are doing something that helps them feel better, you learn about it immediately. They're telling you. So I love that she's got it going in her whole house.
Yeah. And I promise you, if she can do it, anyone can do it, because yes, she was eating the bagels, and yes, going out and having a sandwich with bread, and yes, having, maybe pizza on Friday nights and maybe occasionally cereal in the morning or muffin. So when she looked at it, it looked overwhelming that essentially she would have to change 2 out of 3 meals, and she's doing it. So
all right. More power to her. And just to say that one change lessens all those other things, injections and all the other stuff that might have been on the path. It's just a little bit more arugula.
Yeah. And, and again, the beauty, I always go back to the, action is medicine. Because I could say this, and I've said it on this podcast many a time, that we probably should all get gluten out of our lives. Yeah, when you do it and you treat it like it's being pregnant, either you are or you are not. There's no gray area of being pregnant, right? So that's how we have to kind of approach gluten. If you kind of go gluten-free, you probably won't see the results, quite frankly, not to that extreme, because you will always stay at least slightly inflamed. And so she asked me, she said, if I'm not doing cardio, what did I lose? And we're going to dive into this in just a moment here, but really what she lost is 7 pounds of inflammation, of, down regulation of metabolic activity, of affecting the heart, affecting the brain, all the above, aging process, beating up the skin. That's inflammation. 7 pounds of just being inflamed. You stop the bad guys from coming in, and then the body gets back to being beautiful and doing what it can by getting things out. So power to her. She got a high five.
Well, I think there's a little invitation in this story. Everybody, we are invited to prove Bart wrong. Try gluten-free for 14 days. Let us know.
Well, the commitment was 30 days, but she
Okay.
just happened to come in after 14 days. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. All right. Another clinical insight is, and another interesting one. So this is a little while ago, we did lab work, and in the lab work, I run a couple inflammatory markers, which is a bummer that they're not typically run in almost every lab work. They should be. One's called CRP, that's C-reactive protein. And if that's high, it tells me there's inflammation in your arterial system. That is not okay. That tells us that you have literally a vascular inflammatory process. That's what leads to heart disease. That's why everyone should have that one run. The other one is something called homocysteine, and that is another inflammatory marker. And that will tell us that we could have an anemia, but not even based on iron, could be a B vitamin anemia. And if it's pretty high, so it's supposed to be like optimal, like functionally optimal, 6 to 10 is maybe even lower, about 6 to 9 would be like optimal. The normal ranges for normal people might get up to about 13, 14, and that would kind of still be okay, but let's just keep our eye on this. This particular marker was at 55. So that is full-blown inflammation. And knowing what is causing this inflammation, because we run the tests, and this is where I kind of allude to, when we run lab tests, we're collecting data so we can improve function, not to diagnose what's wrong. I know that sounds crazy, but the goal, if we have data points and we take those data points and say, oh, with what information we're given right now, what can we do to improve the function of this human being? Well, homocysteine also indicates that there's inflammation, but specifically the type of inflammation is typically going to be a B vitamin deficiency. Specific to that, it also, especially when it gets higher like that, is an indicative of you have, most likely if you ran a genetic test, you'd be positive to something they called MTHFR gene. And that means you could potentially have a very genetic issue with metabolizing your B vitamins. Because we have this data, and this is good, this story goes in an interesting place. Because we have this data, we'll go, oh, okay, you know what? One of the simple things, we're going to start to give you methylated B vitamins, whole food B vitamins. And so there's no synthetics, nothing fake there. We're going to give you a little bit more than probably the average person, because we know that you may have a deficiency in just absorbing them. And we're just going to see what your body does. Now, listen, if you have high homocysteine, you have a B vitamin deficiency, things like energy and things like brain function and things like having a nervous system that functions properly and capacity, all of those things get a bit defunct. If you don't have energy, you get lethargic, fatigue, you get weight gain, et cetera. So this individual, we figure this out. We go on the proper supplementation, kind of an easy situation. It's like, oh, look at this. Here's how to improve function. We do that. And over the time, nonetheless, so not part of the goal here, the goal was just to improve human function. Then all of a sudden, the weight just started dropping off. It was not intentional. Person didn't seem like they needed to lose weight, but you saw the face start to thin out, more energy now, clear vibration, a little bit of everything, just because we had the data point. I'm not telling everyone we need labs, but if you have the availability and you have the resources and you run the right labs, meaning comprehensive labs, if you do that, you often get data points that can help you create strategies to move you forward. So this individual, just randomly, the labs were tested again. I think it was about 90 days, and they're down about 10 pounds with absolutely no intention. This was just a biomarker letting us know that there was inflammation as a result of a B vitamin deficiency. So pretty cool, just literally taking B vitamins and improving the status of this. So that marker went from 55 down to 6.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just good and safe, it's optimal. It's in the optimal function range. So that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, and that particular marker, Bart, is that something that you would find like there's some sort of symptom that you could notice without having that kind of lab work to back you up?
I wish there was a particular one. There's really not. Because and here's why. So one of them would be fatigue. That's simple. Hungry after meals because you're not metabolizing B vitamins. Your nervous system seems to be able to handle less and less. Yet, when I say those could be symptoms of a lot of different things. That
Heard.
I just described poor sleep. I just described adrenal dysfunction. I just described running out of testosterone. So it could be a lot of different things there. So that's the advantage of when we collect that data. And I'm not saying that's what everyone needs to do. Yet, if you have the availability, you have the resources, and you want to do that deeper dive with the information that we know now, and especially the lab panel we've been working on over the last several years, and we keep modifying it. The comprehensive male or female panel, it gives us a great amount of data points to really do a deep dive, which is pretty cool.
And I know that you're always evaluating like what the best markers are to have that. If we have listeners out there who are interested in having the right kind of labs, the ones that you see give you a lot of results run, would we be able to share that with them, even if they aren't like here in Santa Rosa with us?
Oh, absolutely. So we can send a lab requisite out to anybody. So let's just say you live in Ohio, we could send a lab requisite out to you, which means we would email you a lab requisite and you'd go to your local lab corp and do that. You would get your blood drawn. Once you get your blood drawn, they'd send us results and new results. And then we would sit down very similar to what we're doing now. We'd do a Zoom and we cover the whole thing and then find out strategies based on the data points and the human being. So we don't just use labs. We never diagnose just off the labs. We got to know what the human is doing and how they're feeling and how they're functioning. We put those two together and find the best strategy to get you as close to superhuman as possible.
That's so cool. And then I do want to ask, is there a particular B vitamin that you find is helpful for folks who know they might be a little short in the MTHFR, have a mutation in that?
So there's a couple. It'd be safe to say, just go with a whole food B vitamin. That would work because it's not synthetic, it's not broken down. So you would be able to utilize that. We use some other ones in the office. We have whole food B vitamin called Cataplex B. That's always my starting point because you will be able to. So really what we're in that category, what we're talking about is getting a methylated B vitamin, and whole foods work as that.
Awesome.
And what's great now, especially, with the science and technology that's coming out and the advancements of, quite frankly, a lot of the science in supplementation, that there's several companies that produce methylated B vitamins. So of course we have good ones in there. If you're at home, you go, wow, I use a methylated B vitamin. Power to you. Awesome.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so happy to hear that they were able to make that small shift, right? Like get the foundation of what's going on inside properly aligned, and then everything else kind of spills out in a better way.
Yes.
That was a good result.
All right. So that wraps it for my clinical insights this week.
Beautiful. All right, Bart, we've got a couple questions. Are you ready for them?
Yep. Let's roll.
All right. So here is the first one. What is the best protein supplement?
Okay. So the best protein supplement, let's do this. We'll limit this to, we'll talk about powders. All right. So this is a big can of worms. And I'm not going to say, well, all right, let's just roll through this. Let's put it into two categories, and we'll talk about the possibility of using a vegetable protein, and again, powdered, or you could use a whey protein, which would be an animal protein. And I guess I'll tell you what, we'll throw a couple comments about collagen as well. So there's a couple things here. First thing you want to do in terms of best bang for buck, what's best for our physiology, for our bodies, really what we want when it comes to protein, regardless of the source, is that protein a complete protein? So I'm gonna get technical for just a second here. A complete protein means that it has all 9 of the essential amino acids. Tryptophan and a whole bunch of others, but they are essential amino acids, meaning that we do not make them in the body. We have to get them through our diet. And together, those 9 essential amino acids is what makes a protein. So with that being said, the easiest, most readily available essential amino acids, all 9 of them, come in animal proteins. That's one of the advantages of eating a diet that's rich in good grass-fed or organic or, pasture-raised animals. That goes from beef, chicken, egg, fish, turkey, pork, all of them are essential amino acids. It's not to say that you can't get the complete protein from vegetables. And in the powdered world, and we use a lot of them in our cafe, typically I think there's 3 that are complete. And again, they have not all 9 essential amino acids. One would be a pea protein that has not all 9 essential amino acids. I believe hemp protein, I probably shouldn't say that unless I really know that. I believe hemp protein and soy, but we're just taking soy right off the board, and we're not going to use soy because about 99% of all soy made in our country is genetically modified. And as a result of it, it's becoming super pro-inflammatory. So let's just take soy out of the category. The challenge with that, I'm saying that with, and if you go to the grocery store right now and you start flipping over protein bars and protein powders, often because it's so cheap, because it's genetically modified, it's so cheap for them to make, it's shelf stable and all this stuff. Soy is one of the most commonly used. So that's an issue right there. So let's go back to pea protein. So I am a fan of plant protein. So in general, once you find out where are your complete proteins, that's what you really want to focus on. A quick note about collagen for a moment. Collagen technically is not a complete program, but I am a huge fan of collagen. It has 8 of the 9 essential amino acids. The one it's missing is a pretty important one. So we don't want to be collagen exclusive. It's missing tryptophan. And we'll talk about tryptophan in a moment because there's so much research done on this particular one and why it's so important for human function, especially brain function later in life. All right, so now we know that we want a complete protein, 9 essential amino acids. We kind of know where they can come from. The best ones when it comes to animals, you're not getting a bunch of beef chopped up and put into a powder. You get what's called whey protein. Whey protein comes from dairy, and it's probably worth me at least describing how this is made so people understand it. So it comes from dairy, and when they make milk and they make yogurt, there's a byproduct, a liquid byproduct, the part that's left over of that dairy. That is what whey protein is. Well, not entirely. That's where whey comes from. That liquid that's left over, 20% of it is whey protein, 80% of it is called casein. Casein, it's another type of protein. The difference between the two of those, they're both super, super high in those amino acids. The whey protein is a fast digesting protein. And this is key, fast digesting. The casein is a slow digesting, because you'll see that in a lot of products too. And because it's so abundant, but it's a very slow digesting protein. So sometimes it upsets stomach. All right, so whey protein, it comes from dairy. About 20% of that byproduct is where it comes from, and it has all 9 essential amino acids. And it's a rock star when it comes to the body. Very fast absorbing. When it comes to like dollar for dollar, buck for buck, whey protein will be the best bang for your buck. If you want to do a little bit of an experiment, I was just up at the farm this past weekend with family. We were talking about this a little bit about different types of protein. I showed them, I pulled out our plant protein, amazing product called Amazing Grass. They've been around for probably 2-3 decades now. They do a great job. And I pulled out what would give us about 12 grams of protein in this scoop. The scoop, Whitney, was huge, huge. It'd be like if I'm holding up 3 fingers, at least 3 fingers tall, if not 4 fingers tall, for one scoop. I pulled out the whey protein, and it was an itty bitty, looked like a large tablespoon. And that's where it plays on us a little bit when we're just label reading, because what ultimately happens to get best bang for the buck, you'll need 3 to 4 times the quantity of animal protein to get the same amount of protein as you would from whey. So not that you can't, because clearly a lot of people do. We use it in our cafe because a lot of people just prefer to have it. So once you have the whey protein, this is where it gets a little separated as well. Inevitably, someone will always ask me, what's better, whey protein isolate or whey protein concentrate? There's big arguments here, and there shouldn't be, because there's minute differences, and somebody's going to yell at me for this, but just trust me, because I'm going to break it down real simple. And so in the 2 different things is this: when it's whey protein concentrate, it's still in its whole form, meaning that 80% of the product, if you have a scoop of it, 80% of that is protein, and the last 20% is made up of a little bit of fat and a little bit of carbohydrate. So it's still a whole food product. The isolate is that scoop is now about 95% protein and only about 5%, zero fat and a little bit of carbohydrate. So you literally need less. So there's less calories in an isolate. When I'm talking calories, I'm talking the difference between 1 and 3. Minor. But the whey protein isolate is a cleaner, like if you're a bodybuilder, this is who it matters to, because you don't want any of the extra calories and all that kind of stuff. So the whey protein isolate does cost a little bit extra money, but the whey protein concentrate is the whole food product. Like in nature, everywhere else, wherever you're going to find a fat, you will find, wherever you find a protein, you always find a little bit of fat. So either one, fantastic for you. Now, the question will often pop up about, because it's whey, because it comes from dairy, how about lactose? Fair question. And the good news is that both of them only have a maximum of 1 to 3% of lactose left over. So even people who are lactose intolerant usually do just fine on whey protein.
That's beautiful and timely. We did have a question come in while you were speaking on this topic from Carla. If you are dairy-free, so maybe that's by choice or maybe that's by body request, you'd say that as well for those folks who are practicing a dairy-free diet?
Yeah, so I have essentially dairy-free diet myself. I'll do full-fat creamers, a little bit here and there, but I try not to stay away from the half and halves. I don't do any milk or anything like that. But anything that removes the lactose from it, like for example, cheese is less than 1%. Most people, even if you're lactose intolerant, maybe if you have a really, really bad sensitivity to it, what I find interesting enough, and this is going to sideways a little bit here, but most people have a real sensitivity to that. It's not so much lactose as much as it is from leaky gut. Yes, here we go back to leaky gut. And this is where it goes. The sensitivity, the sensitive reaction. So usually what happens in lactose, and lactose is a source of sugar, we only have an allergy to proteins, but we have sensitivities to carbohydrates and all other kind of foods. So if you have a lactose intolerance, there's a good chance that somewhere along the way, either you had or you still have a little bit of leaky gut. So I got to a point where I literally could not take any whey in because I was using whey all the time and I had leaky gut. My body developed antibodies against whey protein. So my food sensitivities test showed up for something that's a healthy food, and it was that and coconut oil showed up on a food sensitivity test that I had food sensitivities. It's important we understand the difference between allergy and sensitivity. So after fixing up my leaky gut, now I can eat whey and I have coconut oil every day. So if you find yourself with having reactions to food, most likely the best is elimination diet, clean up the leaky gut. So back, I guess, to Carla's question, if you are lactose intolerant, don't force feed it, but try it. Give it a whirl. Go with a little bit of whey protein. Don't, use 20 buckets of it. Just use a little bit of it and just see how your body does on it and put it with some other natural stuff as well. So with this whole protein thing, again, I want to kind of cover it. And especially, there's a couple of things I want to mention with protein, and especially powdered protein. It gives us a great opportunity to catch up on what is quickly becoming less and less in our diet, and that's proteins. So the carbohydrates are certainly the majority of our diets. And I'm not talking about the good one. I'm not talking about spinach and kale and arugula. I'm talking about all the other ones, the breads and the pastas and that stuff. So having an opportunity to bring in 20, 30, 40 extra grams per day through a smoothie or a shake, phenomenal, literally phenomenal, easy on the digestive system. So I love it for those reasons. Now, with that being said, I also encourage you to rotate your sources, no matter which one you're bound to. And what do I mean by that? So let's just say you have a bucket, I call them buckets, a jar of a tub, I guess a tub they call it. I don't know. What do you call it? Just a bucket.
A pail.
A pail of whey protein at home. Make sure it's clean. Know that it comes from a reputable source. You're probably not picking it up at GNC. The beauty about whey proteins, most of the time you can get them flavorless and you create the flavor in your smoothie. That's the other thing about the vegetable proteins. Almost always they're going to come flavored. They kind of need to, because their flavors will be really, really bad. So they have
Good to know.
yeah, they have to give them a flavor. So you're increasing. If calories are any of issue for you, whatever it may be, you usually have to increase your calories in the scoop size. And therefore your bang for your buck continues to go down. So literally your money goes farther with whey protein. So anyways, rotate your sources. So let's say you go through a bucket of whey protein, and then you grab a pea protein, and then you grab a different protein, and then you're blending in some collagens. Collagens, it's kind of on its own category. You will, by eating whole foods anyways, you will get that extra tryptophan and have so many other benefits from collagen. So you can do both. You can put some collagen inside your smoothie that has whey protein and your other vegetables and your good fats, et cetera. So I'm not going to say there's a clear-cut winner here, but knowing what you're working with is very, very important. So let me go back to protein for a second. This is probably the more important part of this. And it is that, especially for, let's just say 50 years old and above, and women maybe even need to pay more attention to this. As we age, especially when it comes to things like osteoarthritis and, and bone softening and bone weakening and osteoporosis specifically, women, you decline a lot faster than men, and you need building blocks. And those building blocks are proteins. And I have a plant-based diet, but you have to have the proteins to build anything in the human body. And if it takes that much of your plant protein powders to do it, the likelihood of you doing it won't happen. So we're talking about trying to get 20, 40, 50 extra grams per day, and on top of eating your one chicken per day. So when we look at it that way, it's a great opportunity, but you may want to start to incorporate some of the things like a whey protein or whey protein concentrate or an isolate, because it's a good opportunity to get protein so we have the building blocks. So I can go farther with that. I could probably talk about whey protein all night long, because the studies now, instead of just looking at it from a protein and a muscle gaining perspective, which we know that strong people are hard to kill, which is cool. They start to really study, like, what are the effects of tryptophan? So tryptophan is one of the 9 essential amino acids. And we know that's in things like turkey and other meats and whatnot. That's the one on Thanksgiving we think everyone makes them sleepy. They're sleepy because they overate, but tryptophan is there. But tryptophan is a precursor to making serotonin and melatonin. And it's a commonality as a clinical, nutritionist, that when we see people that don't eat animal proteins, they don't get tryptophan, that we see an imbalance in neurotransmitters. And what does that look like? Imbalanced hormones, anxiety, depression, poor sleep. And it's pretty crystal clear when you get to step back, from my perspective, from how often we see this. So again, I'll encourage you, if you've been doing something one way for a long period of time and you're listening to this now and you're saying, well, I wonder how much protein should I be consuming? And I'm going to tell you, probably a 0.6 to 0.8 of your body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that might be 160, maybe 120 grams. And that's a decent amount. I barely consume what I should on a daily basis. I weigh 180 pounds. So let's just say that maybe I should get about 140 grams. That's a lot of burgers.
It's a lot of burgers.
Smoothie helps. You're absolutely right. All right. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Well, here's a little follow-up that we also got during that moment. We've got Heather on the chat here asking, is there a max grams of protein your body can absorb at one sitting or in one smoothie? Like, could you kind of do an overkill in one mealtime?
Yeah, and the way that's going to be, it's not going to be based on the protein. It's going to be based on your digestive capacity. So if you are not chewing it, we have to watch this a little bit more. So the whole idea, if we're going to eat like, some red beef or, a piece of steak or something, a lot of chewing goes into it, gives us time to digest and break things down. But even red meat, you're still not going to get nearly as much protein from whey protein. I found clinically anywhere from between 20 and about 40 grams to sit down with and eat a smoothie over a reasonable amount of time, which may mean, it's not supposed to be done in 3 minutes. So, and how do you know? If you eat too fast or too much of one thing, it sits in your gut too long. But the beauty about the whey protein and those essential amino acids, they're one of the easiest things for us to digest. So that whey protein breaks down faster and easier than, say, a grass-fed burger. And by the way, this past weekend, total side note, I had the world's absolute greatest burger.
That's a real thing to say, Bart. I hope you mean it. I think you
Yeah.
do.
Oh, I mean it. I mean it. It was the most legit, and I made it. There was a tag team effort, but just real quick, it was 30% liver, heart, and then 70% beef. It was literally, shout out to my boy Tony DeBlau, I think it's in his last name, the caveman. He's local. He delivered some, he got me some over the weekend. We had a big family outing, and it was the most legit burger I've had, maybe ever. It was legit. It was yum, yum, yum. So hopefully I answered Heather's question. So 20 to 40 grams, take it over a little bit of time. If you find like you're not digesting it, slow it down a little bit or back it off a little bit, and consider what else is in that smoothie. So, but that is a great question, because sometimes I see my guys, I don't see any girls doing this, but I see my guys try to do like 100 grams in a sitting. Yeah, not going to work that fast.
Mm.
Nowhere for it.
Well, I'm so excited to try this burger someday. Thank you so much for offering. Sounds great. I wonder if you find that people have this idea that if they consume like this amount of protein that you're talking about, they might think like, oh, I'll gain weight, or like this will have some sort of negative effect on like that number on the scale. Like, do you find that this idea of consuming more protein there's like this myth about it kind of in the weight loss world?
There is there really is this overriding concept about protein in general, and it's almost like people are in different camps about it, and unfortunately, and I'm going to continue to speak a fair amount about it in the near future, because it's getting tied into this whole climate change and global warming, and they're really trying to move the consciousness of humans away from eating what's been on this earth forever, like cows and whatnot. And when I look at that concept of that education, it kind of concerns me that we're going to make some really, really weak human beings in the future, because proteins are building blocks. Our country, the other countries, we would not be here if we were not eating what came from the land. And that was a combination of God's garden. It was a plant, root, tree, walks in the garden, swims in the sea. And sometimes one was more abundant than the other. But if you entirely, rule one out and take away a certain source, especially building blocks. Now, next week I can come on and talk about how important it is to have fiber. And it's no protein in it, but it is important to have fiber, because that's what cleans the human body. But we do have to build it. We do have to clean it. So there is an overarching, and I wish I could always just so when people tell me they're vegetarian, they don't eat meat, I have to ask the question to follow it. Do you not eat meat because it doesn't make you feel good, you don't like the taste of it, or it's philosophical? And then when they answer to me, then I say, well, if this is philosophical or religious, okay. And then if it's philosophical, the search for truth, then I say, can I challenge your philosophy for just a moment? And it's very interesting what people do with that. And because I'm in theory, in that moment, I'm their doctor, and I'm trying to lead them in the direction of put all that stuff that you might have learned in the past aside for just a moment, and just think about you. Be selfish for a moment and think about what could make me the strongest, best human being that I possibly could be, the kindest, the most loving, the healthiest, the best leader, all the best mom, best daughter, best son, best husband, whatever it may be. Put all that stuff aside and let that be the overarching theme of what's going to decide and drive your next action. If that happened to be it, it would be hard pressed to rule out animal proteins. And I don't get to have that conversation. So I'm glad this is recorded. I don't get to have that conversation with many of my vegans and vegetarians, because there's a philosophical listen, I understand it. I've had many philosophies, and I'm becoming more educated and humbled, quite frankly. My philosophies over time adapt, and they change, and they move in a direction. And I am certain that I still have some that will change as I move forward. So the fact that you're kind of picking up on that, there's this, like, when I tell people I want you to eat more protein, I have to then say, and the best sources of protein come from your animal products. And then I have to pause. And I'm looking for the feedback. And they're going to say, well, I don't eat meat, or whatever it may be, because there's this weird space.
Mm-hmm. I think that the ideas of like weight loss have kind of changed over the years so much. And to have this idea of eating not to impress the scale, but to get stronger and harder to kill is a great
Yeah,
approach.
yeah. I really love it. And being, you know, around, I have the luxury of being around, I don't know if you want to call it the young and the old, right? And it's so consistent that how we move, how we eat, and how we think really shape where we are headed. And it's pretty obvious where we're headed based on those three things. And it doesn't mean you have to be the best at any one of them. You just have to be moving in a good direction relative to where you were yesterday. That's it. Just moving in that right direction. So maybe you move a little better, maybe you eat a little bit better. I took my wife as a perfect example. I think if she was on here with me, she would confirm that that was the best damn burger she ever had in her life. And
I
Whitney, yeah.
please.
And a year ago, I don't know that she would even have eaten that burger.
That is really cool for Kelly. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that she got to enjoy that awesome meal. And like you guys were in community, right? So you're like eating a great meal with people that you love doesn't get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, so if people wanted, do we just sit down and eat, you know, a big plate of burgers? Yes, we did. And a monstrous salad. And that is pretty typical. So it get a little bit of both. It comes from root plant tree, walks in the garden, swims in the sea. You know, people ask me all the time, so what's your diet look like? I say, that's what it looks like. And I love my diet. It's fantastic. I get to blend in all those good, yummy things. And so part of the reason it was the best burger ever is that I'm an owner of a grill. I haven't had a grill in my adult life, which is, well, no, that's not true. I had one back when I lived in Atlanta, but I have one now. So I try to cook everything on the grill, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of burgers in your future. Lucky Kelly. With this idea of like having a balanced everything in life, I have a question that came in this evening from Lisa and Eric. They're asking how much MCT oil is too much per day. They tend to put 5 to 6 tablespoons in their tea in the morning.
5 to 6 tablespoons is probably pushing the upper limits. Yes. So MCT oil is very concentrated. So it's a medium chain triglyceride. So coconut oil has MCT oil in it, but it also has some other components, not just MCT. So they extract out that MCT. So it's just pure MCT. Typically, I tell people just bowel movements is the answer to that. Often it'll give loose stool. 5 or 6 teaspoons in the morning, upper limits there, probably stick between 1 and 3, and that's perfect. And it gets expensive too. MCT oil is no joke. Like that's you're doling out some money just for MCT oils. Because remember, we can get that. Like I said, coconut oil. There's other options to extract that out. So I would stick probably 1 to 3, and that's probably what I do every morning. I'm probably in that 1 to 3 category, 5 to 6 each. That's getting up there.
Beautiful. And then I've got a challenge for you, Bart. Here is a beautiful question. Can we answer it pretty quickly? You game?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Are there any supplements or natural remedies that we can use for severe chronic sinus congestion? Shannon, thank you for the question tonight. Severe chronic sinus
All right,
congestion.
you want me to do this quickly. So this is how I'm going to answer this. So of course, I'm not acting as a doctor for anyone here, right? I'm not diagnosing, giving any treatments. If someone comes into my office, I'll tell you what we do often in the office. Someone comes in my office and they say they have chronic allergies. That means that there's something they're always been exposed to. We have to find out first what's going in the body. You must check your diet. Absolutely 100%. This is first. You know what I'm going to say next? 2 things that got to go. Yeah, gluten and dairy got to go. Yeah, those are the 2 most across the board. If you want 2 more to follow that, do soy and peanuts. So those 4 things typically can be really, really pro-inflammatory. If you haven't eliminated those for at least 30 days at 100%, make sure that happens. There's a couple other things. I'll ramble off a couple supplements that we use to make sure that you get on the path of right away getting some relief. And there's one called Antronex. Antronex is a beef liver extract. It helps your liver drain so it can handle more of the histamine and not release it up into your sinuses. That's why it gets so uncomfortable. But there's something, if it's chronic, you are exposing yourself to something chronically. And listen, it could be leaky gut, it could be environmental, it could be the conditioners you're using on your hair, but something from the outside is triggering that histamine response. Then there's also a phenomenal herbal, I'll call it a complex called Sinus Forte, which is absolutely amazing. It's more herbal based. And there's one other, if this is chronic, no doubt you have to build up your immune system. Your immune system is in hyperdrive and it becomes hypersensitive. And coming from a guy who's had allergies, the first 20 years of his life, it's miserable. I get it. I had a bout of allergies last week. It was not fun. And all it means is that our immune system is compromised. Things like sleep and diet get out of control or just to get a little bit off track. And then your body goes into really a cytokine storm. We've heard about cytokine storms for the last 3 years here. When your inflammation, your body just goes kind of crazy. So there's one other product you can bring in there that will help start to build up your response to that. And it's called Allerplex. And typically we high dose that one about 6 a day. But those 3 right there, a good starting point. Do not discount the environmental. And when I say environmental, that includes diet. So hopefully that was a quick enough answer.
I think you did really great with the time we had. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Shannon. I do want to say that Kelly came in with the comment saying yes, it was the greatest burger ever. So props.
Yeah.
And I would love to finish us up here, this Health Made Simple show, with the last question. I don't know if you've had a chance to think yet what you'd like to answer, but here it is. What is one step that our listeners can take towards becoming superhuman?
And again, funny thing is, I know this question comes every time, and I don't really have a pre-plan, but I would say this. Think about what I said earlier here about what if you let yourself be selfish for a moment and you chose to only consume things that help you become superhuman? What would that look like? And I think that would be the beginning action that I would have people take, like just not even the action of eating it, but the action of, for a moment, viewing yourself as the most important thing you have in your life. And what would it take to make you the best version of you? And
action becomes the medicine, right?
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Thank you all so much for joining us at the Health Made Simple show.
And again, once again, thank you everyone for being here. Keep doing your thing, keep sharing out, keep spreading the love. And of course, as usual, continue to take deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.